For generations, schoolbooks repeated a simple story. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic and discovered America. It was presented as a clear beginning, a single turning point. But history, when we look closer, is rarely that simple. Nearly 500 years before Columbus ever left Spain, Norse sailors from Greenland had already crossed the North Atlantic and stepped onto the shores of North America. Their journey was not a legend invented in modern times. It was recorded in medieval texts and later confirmed by archaeology. Piece by piece, the evidence has reshaped what we thought we knew. The story begins in Iceland, preserved in two medieval manuscripts known as the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. These sagas were written down in the 1200s, but they describe events that took place around the year 1000 AD. They tell of a merchant named Bjarni Herjolfsson who, blown off course while sailing from Iceland to Greenland, sighted unknown lands to the west. He did not land, but he reported what he saw. Later, Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, set out to investigate those lands. According to the sagas, he and his crew reached places they called Helluland, Markland, and Vinland. Vinland was described as rich with forests, salmon-filled rivers, and even wild grapes. Compared to the rocky landscapes of Greenland, it sounded almost inviting. For centuries, scholars debated whether these accounts were real geography or storytelling. The sagas were part history, part literary tradition. They were shaped by oral storytelling before being written down. Could they truly describe a transatlantic voyage? Or were they exaggerations of shorter journeys within the North Atlantic? For a long time, there was no physical proof. That changed in 1960. On the northern tip of Newfoundland in Canada, a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad began investigating local stories about strange old mounds in a place called Lance aux Meadows. He was joined by archaeologist Anne Stein Ingstad. What they uncovered would quietly transform world history. Beneath the grassy soil, they found the remains of 8 turf buildings. The structures were built in a style identical to Norse houses in Greenland and Iceland. Inside, they discovered iron nails, a bronze cloakpin, a spindle whorl used for spinning wool, and evidence of iron smelting. Iron production was especially important. At that time, indigenous groups in the region did not produce iron. The presence of a small smithy strongly pointed to Norse settlers. Radiocarbon dating placed the site around the year 1000 AD. It was the first confirmed European settlement in North America nearly 5 centuries before Columbus. The discovery did not involve deep-sea mystery or lost underwater cities. It was not a case of submerged civilizations hidden beneath the ocean floor. Instead, it was careful archaeological work on land. But like many ancient ocean discoveries, it revealed just how far early sailors were willing to travel across dangerous waters. Standing at Lance aux Meadows today, the landscape feels open and exposed. Cold winds move in from the Atlantic. It is easy to imagine long ships approaching the rocky shore after weeks at sea. These were wooden vessels with no modern navigation tools, guided by stars, currents, and experience. The crossing from Greenland would have required skill and courage, and yet the settlement does not appear large. Archaeologists believe only a small group lived there, perhaps 70 to 90 people at most. The buildings suggest workshops, storage areas, and living quarters. There are no large cemeteries, no clear signs of long-term farming, no evidence of a growing town. Everything about the site suggests a temporary camp rather than a permanent colony. That detail matters. The sagas mention encounters with indigenous people, whom the Norse called Skraelings. These interactions may have included trade, but they also likely involved conflict. The Norse population in Greenland was small to begin with. Supplying and defending a distant settlement would have stretched their resources thin. Archaeologists believe the Norse may have stayed at Lance aux Meadows for only a few years, perhaps even less. The site may have served as a base for exploration farther south, where forests were thicker and resources more abundant. Some scholars argue that Vinland, with its mention of grapes, was likely located farther down the Atlantic coast, possibly in areas like New Brunswick or Nova Scotia. But despite decades of searching, no confirmed Norse settlements have been found beyond Newfoundland. Researchers have used aerial surveys, soil analysis, and even methods similar to those used in underwater archaeology to examine coastal areas where erosion may have altered ancient shorelines. Some suspected sites have been investigated carefully. So far, none have produced the same clear evidence found at Lanceau Meadows. In 2021, another breakthrough added more precision to the timeline. Scientists used tree ring dating on wooden artifacts from the site. They identified a solar storm recorded in tree rings worldwide in the year 993 AD. Counting forward from that marker, they determined that Norse woodcutting activity at the site took place in 1021 AD. It was an exact year, not just an estimate. That kind of detail leaves little room for doubt. The Norse were in North America in the early 11th century, and yet their presence was brief. There was no lasting colony, no steady line of communication back to Europe that reshaped maps or trade routes. After a short period, the site was abandoned. Why? The reasons likely include distance, limited population, possible conflict, and the challenges of maintaining a fragile Greenland society at the edge of the known world. The Norse in Greenland were already living in a harsh environment. Expanding farther west may simply have been unsustainable. So here we are with a confirmed fact. Vikings reached North America around the year 1000 AD. But how far did they travel beyond Newfoundland? How long did their voyages continue? Did small expeditions return for timber or resources even after the settlement ended? The archaeological record is quiet on those details. What we have are solid remains of buildings, tools, and dated wood. What we do not have is a clear map of their full exploration. That quiet gap is where the mystery lives, not in fantasy, not in exaggerated claims, but in the simple reality that a small group of Norse sailors crossed an ocean centuries before Columbus, built a camp on a distant shore, and then left. They arrived first. The evidence shows it. But their story did not echo across Europe at the time. It did not reshape the world. And that raises the deeper question that still lingers today. If the Norse arrived before Columbus, why did their discovery not change history? By the early 11th century, Norse sailors had reached the shores of North America. Archaeology has confirmed it. The remains at Lanceau Meadows, dated to around 1021 AD through precise tree ring analysis, leave little doubt. Iron tools, turf houses, and work timber all point to a Viking presence. And yet, this voyage did not change the course of world history. So the question naturally follows. If the Vikings reached America nearly 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus, why didn't it reshape the world? The answer begins in Greenland. The Norse settlements there were never large. Founded by Eric the Red around 985 AD, the eastern and western settlements survived for several centuries in a harsh environment. Archaeological excavations show farms, churches, and traces of trade with Europe. Walrus ivory especially was valuable in medieval markets. For a time, Greenland functioned as a remote but connected part of the Norse world, but it was always fragile. By the late 1300s, signs of decline were clear. The climate cooled during a period often called the Little Ice Age. Sea ice increased in the North Atlantic, making voyages more dangerous and unpredictable. Shorter growing seasons made farming difficult. Excavated animal bones from Greenland show a shift over time from cattle to more reliance on seals and fish. This suggests adaptation, but also struggle. Trade with Norway weakened. Europe's demand for walrus ivory declined as African elephant ivory became more accessible. Without steady trade, Greenland became even more isolated. By the early 1400s, the Norse settlements disappeared entirely. Archaeologists have found no signs of violent destruction. Instead, the evidence suggests gradual abandonment. The population likely dwindled until the colonies could no longer sustain themselves. If Greenland itself could not survive, maintaining a distant outpost in North America would have been even harder. Unsolved appears to have been a small base, not a permanent colony. There is no sign of large-scale farming or long-term expansion inland. It was likely used for exploration or timber gathering. Timber was scarce in Greenland, and North America offered forests that Greenland did not have. But even a resource base requires support from home. When Greenland weakened, the western link to North America would have broken naturally. Then there is the question of knowledge. The Norse voyages were preserved in Icelandic sagas written down in the 13th century. These texts describe Vinland and the journeys of Leif Erikson, but they were not widely circulated across Europe. They were literary works rooted in oral tradition, not official maps or navigational guides. Medieval Spain and Portugal were not studying Icelandic manuscripts for geographic clues. There is no strong evidence that Columbus had reliable knowledge of Norse voyages. Some fringe theories suggest he may have heard rumors during his travels in the North Atlantic. However, mainstream historians have found no documented proof linking Columbus to Viking accounts. His letters and logs show that he believed he had reached islands near Asia. By 1492, Europe was different from the world of the Vikings. Spain had just completed the Reconquista. Ferdinand and Isabella were looking outward, ready to compete for trade routes and influence. Columbus did not sail alone as an isolated explorer. He sailed with royal backing, with political support, and with the promise of further expeditions if he succeeded. When he returned, more ships followed. Colonies were established, trade networks expanded. Within decades, European powers were deeply connected to the Americas. The Norse voyage did not create that chain reaction. It left no lasting settlement, no steady exchange of goods, no political support system pushing for expansion. It was an arrival without sustained contact. In history, impact often defines discovery. Modern archaeology has slowly filled in the missing pieces. The 1960 discovery at Unsolved was only the beginning. Excavations over decades uncovered clear evidence of Norse life. In 2021, researchers confirmed through tree ring dating that Norse activity occurred in 1021 AD. The wood used in construction showed signs of metal tool marks, and the tree rings matched a known solar storm event recorded worldwide in 993 AD. Counting forward gave an exact year. This was not a guess, it was a precise scientific result. Still, researchers remain cautious. Claims of additional Viking settlements along the Atlantic coast have been carefully tested. Soil samples, artifact analysis, and remote sensing surveys have been used to evaluate possible sites. Some findings initially seemed promising, but later proved to be natural formations or later period artifacts. The scientific standard is strict. Evidence must be physical, datable, and clearly Norse. In some cases, coastal erosion and changing shorelines have complicated the search. Just as underwater archaeology investigates sunken structures and ancient ocean discoveries beneath shifting seas, researchers studying Viking expansion must consider how landscapes have changed over 1,000 years. But so far, no large Norse colonies have been confirmed beyond Newfoundland. There are no lost underwater cities tied to Viking America, no submerged civilizations waiting offshore. The story is quieter than that. It is a brief presence, a small settlement, a few years of activity, and then silence. When Greenland collapsed, the memory of Western voyages likely faded with it. Europe in the 15th century was not connected to Icelandic storytelling traditions. Without sustained contact or economic impact, the knowledge of Vinland did not spread widely. Columbus, on the other hand, sailed at a moment when Europe was ready for expansion. Printing presses were spreading information faster than ever before. Monarchies were competing for global influence. Exploration became part of national strategy. The Norse voyage happened too early. It was bold, but it was not backed by powerful kingdoms seeking global trade networks. It did not spark immediate follow-up expeditions from across Europe. It did not reshape maps in royal courts. So when history books were written centuries later, Columbus became a symbol. His voyage marked the start of sustained European contact with the Americas. It led to permanent settlements, cultural exchange, conflict, colonization, and global economic change. The Vikings arrived first, but they did not create that transformation. Today, historians often explain the difference carefully. If discovery means the first known arrival of Europeans in the Americas, then the Norse were there around 1000 AD. Archaeology confirms it. If discovery means the beginning of continuous global exchange between continents, then 1492 marks that turning point. It is not about replacing one name with another. It is about understanding the full timeline. The mystery now is not whether Vikings reached America. That question has been answered through evidence, not speculation. The deeper mystery is why their presence slipped into historical silence for so long. The answer lies in fragile colonies, shifting climates, limited communication, and the absence of political momentum. One voyage reached a distant shore and quietly ended. Another voyage returned to Europe and changed the world, and that quiet difference between arriving and transforming history is what keeps this story alive.